Keep in mind that 96% of Congress has zero healthcare background. Only 4% has any kind of healthcare background. 100% of Congress votes on healthcare issues. So there's a huge gap there that we need to continue to educate.
Welcome to RadCentral, a radiology podcast produced by Excalibur Healthcare. I'm Betsy.
And I'm Kiana.
Let's get into it. So we're thrilled to have a returning guest here on the podcast. We have Ted Burns. Welcome. Ted Burns is the Senior Director of Political Affairs and RadPac for the American College of Radiology. How are you, Ted?
Doing well. How are you all?
Mm-hmm. Doing mighty fine. In season 1, we had the pleasure of getting to know you and your work as a political advocate and how it impacts the field of radiology. Today, you're back with us to provide us just a little update on the developments in Congress, the influence of the new administration, and what that all means for radiology.
Look forward to it. There's no shortage of stuff to talk about, that's for sure.
I also want to point out, Ted, you are a leader of RadPac, the ACR's bipartisan political action committee, and you are aiming to support and elect pro-radiology candidates at the federal level.
Yeah, I appreciate the plug. Thank you. Mm-hmm. I have it on my outfit. I don't know if this is audio only, but if you can see me, you can see my little swag.
You came prepared. No, I saw it as soon as you came on the computer.
First question. How's the energy in Washington, D.C. lately?
So I've been doing this with radiology for well over 20 years now. And it's funny because I feel like every year we're like, well, it's not going to get worse. It's not going to get crazier. It's not going to get uglier. But somehow, lately, over the last few years, it's found a way to one-up itself every year. This year in particular is unique. You have just a general vibe is that, Democrats, it's in a way they want to obviously be in the majority because then they can make decisions on policies and have more impact. But there's also nothing easier than being in the minority and just throwing darts at the other party, right? You're in the minority party and the Republicans are giving them tons of stuff to really throw darts at. And so it's very easy to sit there. They don't have to be necessarily like, oh, it's so hard to unify. It's very easy for them to unify as, being the minority party and throwing darts at the Republicans. And it would be the other way around if the situation was reversed. The Republican side, they're like, yes, we're in the majority. We have control of the White House, control of the House, control of the Senate. Man, this is great. We're going to get everything we want. But careful what you ask for when you're majority, because now you have expectations to get a lot done. You have a lot of people who feel like, hey, we can get stuff done. I personally can get stuff done. So I have this pet issue or pet issues that I really want to push. But how does that all work as far as they really do need to be unified in trying to get stuff across the finish line? And so that's the congressional side. Now, I think the biggest frustration from my conversations with a lot of Republican House members, particularly, we want to be proactive and get the ball rolling on some of the stuff we really want to do. But we have to react every day to what's happening from the White House. And so that's a very tricky balance for them to figure out how do we do what we want to do, but then also the moment Trump says something, we have to be ready to respond, react, move. And that's a really difficult position to be in because there's very little coordination and communication between the White House and the House Republican majority in particular. So I think that's a very real challenge. And that's something that we're witnessing on almost every industry, every issue. It's not just only healthcare.
Are you able to share any updates that are focused around the workforce issues that the radiology field is experiencing?
Yeah, I mean, this is an issue, the workforce issue is something I hear everywhere I go. And this is probably more so over the last 2 or 3 years, I feel like, as you have a lot of the radiologists who are now getting closer to retirement, or they've almost become incentivized to retire earlier than they had initially thought they would because of all the uncertainty with payment and the cuts and the volume and the just overall fatigue, the emotional fatigue, the intellectual fatigue of being overwhelmed with work. There's no shortage of volume. And I think that's a real concern. That's something that, again, I hear more so now over the last couple of years than ever before. I was just at a conference last week for RBMA, and this was a very real topic. trying to recruit folks into radiology, and what are the best ways to do that. Now, there are some things that we look at. We look at residency slot funding. That's something that we feel is going to be very helpful. However, we have to really focus on conversations with members of Congress who are supportive of increasing funding for residency slots, but they want to see a lot of those residency slots going towards family medicine or mental health providers. And both of those are very, very important parts of the delivery of healthcare. We support that. But we don't want to see it to be a 75% to them and 25% to the rest of specialty medicine. And of that 25% of specialty medicine, radiology is just one of many specialty organizations, and we're all fighting for that 25%. That's a really difficult place to be. And so we have to say, and I like to say this, and it gets me in trouble all the time, I don't care, is that, family medicine absolutely 100% is an important part of the delivery of healthcare system. But there's also a ton of people in family medicine who are every day referring tons and tons and tons of patients to get imaging done. And so that, we have to be mindful of that, right? So we're funding all these family docs to sit there and refer all these patients to get imaging done. Well, who's doing all the imaging and doing all the reads if we're not getting some of that residency slot funding as well? Also, there has been a reintroduction of, I believe, Conrad 30, which addresses when you have people who are coming over here to train, maybe from a different country, how long they can stay, the visas and things of that nature. And that's something that, I think we feel that it's something that should be a major focus. When you get some very bright people from a different country to come and they train here, we want to keep them here. We want to be able to incentivize them to stay and not go home because, oh, my visa expired. No, we need you. You train from the best here in the U.S., stay here in the U.S. There is a absolute need for you to stay here. So we're working on that as well. So I say residency slots and then the visa processes are two things that are a really big part of the workforce component.
Absolutely. The National Institute of Health has been in hot water as of last month regarding their attempt to cap the reimbursement rates for indirect costs at 15%, which would result in $4 billion in government savings, right? As of early March, a federal judge has blocked that current administration from carrying out these, and I quote, insufficiently justified cuts. While this is a big win for research institutions across the country, based off of your experience, is there a likelihood that the outcome of this will be in favor of the medical professionals and patients?
There is no doubt that those in academic radiologists are very interested in this issue and very worried about this issue, and they're monitoring this issue. And, we're hearing all the time in the media, and we kind of let off a little bit with this, and all the things that are out there and trying to process cuts. What does this mean? How does this impact me? Is this going to really happen? When does it happen? How does it impact us when it does happen? So now, in full disclosure, NIH is not part of my portfolio. However, in reaching out to one of my colleagues internally at the college, I'm going to read to you what was shared with me. So for fiscal year 2025, the CR, the continuing resolution, it extends statutory language preventing the administration from imposing the 15% cut on F&A, so facilities administrative cost reimbursement. So for now, the language protecting any changes to the F&A remains in place. The administration is challenging that statutory prohibition in courts. Regarding fiscal year 2026, it's a completely different issue. And it's been noted that the House Appropriations Chair, Congressman Tom Cole from Oklahoma, he supports F&A. And so unless the administration pressures him to do otherwise, he's likely not to concede on this topic. He is likely going to want to continue to make sure that Congress has the authority and is involved in that process.
Absolutely. Well, I think there's a lot of unification that is happening that I also think people are hoping for. It's reassuring to hear that there is some sparks of good news here and there when we can get it.
Right. Take it when you get it.
Exactly. What are your perspectives of non-physicians ordering imaging exams? So this is a two-part question. First perspective, relative to the appropriateness of ordering, and also their understanding of exam results and their actions for patient management.
This is one of those issues like workforce and payment reimbursement, payment reform that gets brought up all the time. Um, I think we need to be aware of who are the non-physicians who are ordering. I mean, I think it kind of depends if it's like a radiologist assistant, that's different than if it's someone who is maybe not in the radiology space at all. And what's interesting and the kind of the perspective that I'm hearing a lot of very recently is when you have a lack of access in certain rural communities, then there tends to be more of this behavior. And then it becomes a matter of, well, okay, yeah, we need some type of access to care, but is this quality care? Are we getting the right images ordered? Are we having the right people interpreting the images that have been ordered? And so just because there's a need for care doesn't mean that the quality should suffer essentially. Um, I will tell you that we are doing a pretty heavy focus with appropriate use criteria. And so now that kind of is pretty much more, the physicians who are ordering, like if a ER doc, orthopedic surgeon, or other types of specialty physicians are ordering imaging, we want to see them go through an appropriate use criteria process protocol, because we feel like that's something that will ensure that the right image is being ordered at the right time, and also that maybe there's no imaging needed at all in certain respects. We see big violations of that, obviously, in the emergency room. You don't have a patient relationship. You've got a pretty serious set of circumstances a patient is coming and presenting with. And so it's a kind of a rule out game. But with regard to the non-physicians, yeah, I mean, that's a really big deal, really big concern, because, again, it goes back to the quality. And so that's something that we monitor. And it's actually something that you see a lot at the state level, just as much at the federal level. You're looking at essentially almost a scope of practice issue. Um, what is interesting to me, and I've always had a hard time understanding, I understand the financial incentive dynamic for non-physicians doing this behavior, but I don't understand why they want to be subject to doing it particularly on the interpretive side. Like, because then you have the liability component to it. And I've never understood that. To me, I don't think the money would be worth the liability, but maybe it is, or maybe there's exemptions. I don't know in particular cases, but this is an issue at the federal level, but I think even more so at the state level.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of action in state news, and it does seem to be more of a state issue because non-physician practitioners, the rules for what is in their scope of practice is determined at the state level.
And I'll give you another place where we're seeing this really present itself is in the VA system. You see optometrists are getting a lot of privileges. That was a big thing in Oklahoma for a little bit. I know, obviously, the anesthesia space, that's always kind of a big scope issue too. But we've seen it in the VA setting as well. And that's something that is actually, in a way, it's a kind of a blessing, because a lot of the physician community, we have our own little niche issues, but this is an issue we all rally around pretty regularly and pretty comfortably. So that's always good when all of us can come together, and especially at the state level, to try to defeat something. At the state level, it's very easy to get something kind of snuck into legislation, because you have so much fewer stakeholders and so much less publicity and visibility from a media perspective. You can get something, you get the right legislator with the right type of access pressure point, you can get something through pretty quickly. And then you have to rely on maybe a governor veto or the other legislative body to not pass it. But it's a big deal at the state level for sure.
Segue to coming together to talk about payment reform.
Oh yeah.
There's a lot of pressure on Congress to reverse a 2.83 cut to the conversion factor of physician payments and provide instead a 2% increase. In mid-February, Representative Greg Murphy, a physician, when he introduced a bipartisan legislation called Medicare Patient Access and Practice Stabilization Act of 2025. This legislation prevents further cuts, provides modest inflationary adjustment to ease the cost of care, and ensures that Medicare remains viable for patients and doctors. If it does not go through, what are some of the consequences that we will be seeing?
Yeah, I mean, the consequences are the obvious ones, right? You're looking at Again, more workforce issues. You have folks who are like, I'm just going to retire. The financial uncertainty of practicing, and again, that's not unique to radiology; it's across the whole house of medicine. You're looking at, you're playing catch up every time that there's not legislation to address a cut. Now the next piece of legislation is addressing two cuts, because now you're working with the previous year's cuts that may still be in place, along with whatever current year cuts that are being proposed by CMS. And so that compounds the financial situation. Is I think, there's perceptions and there's realities, right? And so I think the perceptions are docs, yeah, we haven't given them a positive bump in years, but they're docs, right? They're still at the country club. They still have a nice car. They still have multiple houses. The docs aren't suffering. They're just not maybe thriving as much as they used to. But the docs are docs, and the docs are whole. And the docs are also going to always be there. The docs aren't going to strike. The docs aren't going to stop seeing patients. So there's a real kind of optics of taking the docs for granted. Okay. And I think that's kind of one part of this whole thing as to why Congress finds himself in this situation every year where they're kind of dragging their feet to provide us some short-term and then ultimately longer-term reform that is well overdue. But the other part is I think it's also like looking at practice and looking at how these practices are small businesses, medium-sized businesses, in some case with big practices like Charlotte Radiology. That is a big practice in that community. That is a major employer in that community. That's not just mom and pop small little McDonald's across the street. I mean, you're talking hundreds of employees, including hundreds of rads, and huge overhead costs and high paying jobs, high skilled jobs. And so what is the impact on all of that? And so that would be all the implications if this isn't addressed. Now, I'll tell you, there's a couple things that have been discussed. It is really, really, really difficult when I'm up on the Hill to have conversations with Democrats and Republicans. I could say, okay, if you're breathing, is that important to life? And I could ask a Democrat and Republican, they could probably disagree on the fact that breathing's, important, right? I mean, you can't get anyone to agree on anything. If you say, well, I'll just ask this Democrat, they said this. Now, the Republican, do you agree? Slight hyperbole, but it's not.
Who's on the side of breathing? I want to know.
No, that's a hypothetical. But you understand the gist of what I'm saying. It's a very contentious environment. This is one issue that's not that contentious. And so when you look at the level of co-sponsorship on the bill that Congressman Murphy has, it is equally supported by Republicans, Democrats. It is almost complete 50-50 down the middle. It's not like, 85% of the co-sponsors are Republicans and, only 15% are Democrats or vice versa. It is completely a bipartisan issue, which is fantastic. Now, what you need to do on any kind of legislation that's a standalone legislation like this, you need probably upwards of 200 co-sponsors out of the 435 House members in order to really get attention. If you get 200 and it's pretty evenly divided in support between Republicans and Democrats, now you've got yourself a fighting chance. You have a chance to get it, before the committee of jurisdiction. You have a chance for it to be voted out of committee, and you have a chance for it to go on the House floor for a full vote. Now, the other thing that can happen is it can go through what's called a unanimous consent calendar, where basically they suspend the rules and they basically can bring up a piece of legislation that is deemed non-controversial. And in most cases, this is deemed non-controversial. Now, the price tag is not insignificant. It's a significant amount of money. But because of the 50-50 split of support between R's and D's, that's something that could be a path. More likely, and what has been reported by the press, as well as being reported, quite frankly, by these members of Congress, particularly Greg Murphy. I was at a Doc Caucus lunch with him about 3 weeks ago, and he had just come the night before out of a meeting with Majority Leader Scalise and with Speaker Mike Johnson. And he said, hey, you gave me an assurance at the end of last year this would be addressed. It wasn't. You gave me an assurance it would be addressed in the continuing resolution. It wasn't. Now we're 0 for 2. One more strike, and you know what's going to break loose here. I need a public assurance. And so they said, we can give you an assurance it'll be in the reconciliation bill, which is likely to happen sometime this late spring or summer. which that reconciliation bill, by the way, was only supposed to really address issues, border security, energy policy, some other stuff. Now the leadership in the House is saying this is something that they will include. Now, that said, what Murphy asked leadership in the Republicans was, okay, can we get an assurance publicly where I can go out and say, House Republican leaders are 100% going to put this in reconciliation. And House Republican leadership said, well, yeah, maybe. They didn't really want it fully out there because if it doesn't get included, they have egg on their face as well. So Murphy was telling us, he said, forget it. I'm just going to do it. I'm going to say that Scalise was on board, Johnson was on board. This is going to happen. As a result of him doing that, then Majority Leader Scalise came out and said, yes, he's right. We did make this assurance. We did make this agreement. We're going to push for this to be included in reconciliation. Last thing I'll say about this is that they are talking that this will be not long-term permanent type of situation, but it will be more than just a quick short-term little fix. And so what that means, we don't know, but I've heard years, not year. And so what they're going to do is they're going to insert it in reconciliation. They may have to tweak it and play with the language a little bit, but that is kind of cautiously optimistic news.
We could be hopeful that we're not just going to be putting a Band-Aid over a bullet hole, essentially.
That's a great Morgan Wallen reference, yes.
Do you have anything else to share with RadCentral right before we let you go?
I was just on a call earlier today with some of our consultants that we use, and these are people who used to work on the Hill, who still have very strong relationships with members of Congress, and we use them as kind of sounding board for things that we want to do. Talking about the Doge cuts, you hear all about how much money they're going to save and all that. How does that impact us? Can we take, and I've been asked this question, can they take some of that money and use it to apply to pay for someone like Congressman Greg Murphy's bill for, doc fix costs? The answer to that is probably no, because there's so many other things that they're trying to do with that savings to address the overall debt that we're facing. I think midterms are a really big deal. I know we are just still surviving and recovering from the craziness of this past election, with it being a big presidential election and everything, but the midterms are right around the corner, and the midterms obviously impact every House seat and about a Senate. And with the margins being so tight in the House, there's a lot of leverage being used to influence policy. And I'll give you an example: Medicaid cuts. That was a big thing that came out. Oh my gosh, they're going to slash and burn Medicaid, right? Well, you have a lot of House Republicans, the top 15 House vulnerable Republican members who are going to have the hardest reelection in 2 years. They so happen, coincidentally, be from districts that are probably one of the most impacted group of areas, just ironically, when it comes to Medicaid. And so they have had a complete fit. Hey, if you want to slash Medicaid, that's what you're going to want to do. I'm going to lose my race. And if I lose my race, Democrats are going to be in control of the House, not Republicans. And then what is the impact of that? That's very real implications of the midterms already in a year and a half, 2 years from now on policy. Tariffs, obviously everyone's going crazy. Tariffs, I just had to get a car for my son, and everyone else who ever thought about buying a car was also there because everyone's freaking out about the tariffs. But how does that impact radiology? How does it impact healthcare? Very real conversations being had here. You have a lot of equipment coming in from a lot of places outside the U.S. that's going to have maybe some potential impact on practices. You're looking at HHS staffing cuts. With those staffing cuts at HHS, how does that impact implementation? How does it impact CMS being able to do proposed rulemaking? All these things, that's very real concerns. AI, we haven't even talked about AI. AI is a huge deal. If you think AI is not going to have a major place in this space of conversation, not just in healthcare, but very specifically in radiology, you're mistaken. Look, the influence of Elon Musk. He cares a lot about AI stuff, right? He's going to make sure that AI is somehow going to touch in places when it comes to healthcare and radiology. There's actually been commercials from Meta that have been out there that are talking about, well, AI is just as good as radiologists. And so there's a narrative we need to be really careful about that doesn't get too far out of the bottle And we got to say, hey, AI is complementary to radiology. AI does not replace radiology. So a lot going on. Sorry for rambling, but as you can tell, I get kind of worked up about these things.
Thanks for rambling. It's something I don't think we had even thought to consider how the tariffs would affect the purchasing of radiology equipment. That's absolutely a radiology-related concern that was not on our radar.
I think there's a little bit of desensitized. You hear the word tariffs so much and so often that it's like, well, that doesn't directly affect radiology, and it directly affects radiology.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. I think some of these topics, like even AI, right? Like, I mean, we know AI is going to impact radiology, but you hear AI in so many different industries. You hear tariffs, so many different industries. But all these things, for some reason, still come back to healthcare and still come back even more specifically to radiology. And so it puts a lot on our plate, and we're happy to address them all. But we are not bored. I'll put it to you that way. We are not twiddling thumbs these days.
Before we end, I know that it's important for you to remind radiologists, and we have our radiologist audience, if they want to make an impact on what's happening in Washington, how can they get involved with some of your activities?
Email me. Just email me. There are so many. I mean, we'd love to get people on the Hill Day. We'd love to get people to have a coordination with us to get a member of Congress to visit the radiology practice, to educate members of Congress about what it is radiologists do. Keep in mind that 96% of Congress has zero healthcare background. Only 4% has any kind of healthcare background. 100% of Congress votes on healthcare issues. So there's a huge gap there that we need to continue to educate. We had a lot of members of Congress leave in the last election, whether they lost, they retired, whatever the case may be. And so, we have a lot of new members of Congress we need to educate, as well as existing members of Congress who've been there for years and years and years and still need to be educated. So the Hill Day, site visits, contribute to RadPac, participate in call to actions where you email your legislator and say, hey, XYZ bill is really important to radiology, and this is why. I mean, all those types of things are pieces of a puzzle. And they're really important. I mean, there's nothing worse than spending all your time getting excited to finish a puzzle, and then the dog ate the last piece, and you can't, and it happens to be right in the middle of the puzzle piece, right in the puzzle. So all these are really important pieces to what we do and to have impact. If they can email me at tburnes@acr.org or acra.org, either one, I'm more than happy to walk them through all the different ways they can be involved and to be educated on what's going on.
Absolutely. I mean, thank you for sharing your contact info. That's something that we definitely want to tether to this episode. There's a lot of great information that you were able to share with us, and we're very thankful that we have a representative to go and let us know all of the juicy details going on the Hill.
Oh, there's way more. There's way more details, but that's about a 4-hour show. Trust me. I got some stuff that could be really juicy, but I'll refrain for now.
Well, thank you for supporting radiologists at the federal level.
Absolutely. I appreciate you guys doing this as a vehicle to educate folks. And if there's ever an opportunity that I can be helpful, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Okay. There will be more listeners, more than just your mom this time.
Well, we'll see. I have to start paying people, I think, maybe at least to hear me talk, but I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care, y'all.
That brings us to the end of today's insightful episode with Ted Burns. And this is RadCentral, a radiology podcast, a production of Excalibur Healthcare.
And in that, we're celebrating 25 years of radiology and a commitment to patient-centric care. Thank you for tuning in to RadCentral.